become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Beyond the immediate devastation, nuclear war gravely threatens our global civilization and, just possibly, the human species.
Weapons. The blast can injure the human body through effects such as rupturing eardrums or lungs, or by throwing people at dangerous speeds. Collapsing structures and flying debris caused by the blast can also lead to injury. This can range anywhere from smaller scrapes and wounds to a person's bones being crushed. Death can occur if the damage is bad enough. Even if they don't die immediately, it can be possible for a person to be buried under rubble that they can't escape from.
The radiant heat from the blast would be strong enough to cause third-degree burns on exposed skin. And as you get closer to the blast, the heat becomes so intense that clothing, even skin, would ignite into flames.
To more long-term health consequences such as cataracts, and after effects have been seen in cases like Hiroshima that involve problems like thyroid disease. Some also believe it can lead to birth defects. Nuclear.
And it is probable that in the ensuing months, the vast majority of the American and Russian population, those who were not killed outright in the first half hour of the attack, they too would die from starvation, from exposure, from epidemic disease, from radiation poisoning.
What does nuclear fallout do to the human body? A big danger comes in the form of cancer and radiation. When exposed to the radiation from nuclear fallout, it can cause a chemical change in a person's cells, which can kill or make the cells abnormal. If the cell's DNA is damaged, this can lead to cancer.
These houses had to be abandoned after a reactor exploded at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine in 1986. Radioactive particles were carried 140 kilometers on the wind and in rain clouds, and deposited here in huge amounts.
Because it turns out that the firestorms started by these weapons cause more than 5 million tons of debris to be lofted into the upper atmosphere, where they block out sunlight, causing temperatures across the planet to drop an average of 1.3 degrees centigrade. This shortens the growing season, cuts down on precipitation, and this disrupts food production.
More than 30 million people would die immediately, and twice that many would be injured. As the video points out, deaths would rise as nuclear fallout settles. This occurs when residual radioactive material propelled into the upper atmosphere falls back to Earth.
Learned that under this scenario, U.S. corn production would fall about 12%, and this decline would last for a full decade. Chinese middle-season rice production would drop nearly 15%, and this too would persist for a whole decade. And some preliminary studies that are just now being done suggest that corn production in China and wheat production in China might drop even more.
The long-term effects of an all-out nuclear exchange between the US and Russia would be severe. Agriculture would be significantly reduced for at least a year, likely more. Anyone surviving the war in the affected countries would face destroyed supply lines, limited water, food, and near or below freezing conditions. More recent estimates suggest that even after arsenal reductions from the US and Russia, nuclear winter remains essentially a certainty. A July study from Rutgers calculated that fires from burning structures following the blast would inject 300 billion pounds of soot into the atmosphere. This would push temperatures below freezing in the summertime in the Northern Hemisphere, reducing planting season by 90%. Global average surface temperatures would fall by 9 degrees Celsius. Rainfall would also drop meaningfully near the equator. It would take several years before surface light from the sun was even half what it was before the war, and complete recovery would take a decade.
People laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent.